Hello, everyone, and welcome to the live FICHEF Wine Talk. My name is Wolfgang Junglas. I'm the president of FICHEF, the International Federation of Wine and Spirit Journalists and Writers. Winemakers from Israel will now tell you more about their wine growing region and their winery. The first one is Victor Schönfeld from Golan Heights Winery. Victor has been working there as a head winemaker since 30 years, which is quite a long time. He is responsible for 230 hectares of vineyards. I think in Germany we have complete wine regions who have 230 hectares. So that is really a big size. Victor, the Golan Heights has almost the same ideal conditions in terms of soil and climate as Bordelais or Tuscany. You have worked in France. Is wine growing in your region similar?
Thank you for having me tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. There are definitely some similarities. If I had to pick between Bordeaux and Tuscany, we'd be a little bit more similar to Tuscany. Bordeaux being maritime climate would be much different than the climate that we have in the Golan Heights and in Israel in general, so quite a bit different.
So what are you telling us about the Golan Heights winery?
Okay, so I have 8 minutes. I'm going to throw a lot of information at you. I'm a big fan of Israeli wines in general, and it's an honor to present with the other Israelis here tonight. You might get the impression that there are only men in the Israeli wine industry from this evening, but that's not true. At our winery, we also have 2 women winemakers. We have a woman viticulturist and 2 women vineyard managers. So they're also obviously a very important part of our industry. So here's a picture of the northern Golan Heights at harvest time. And you can see in the picture the volcanoes, the cinder cones that form the Golan Heights. You can see some of the original forest, which is mostly oak forest, which was cut down mostly during the Ottoman Empire rule in the area. And you can see a lot of vineyards. For people that aren't familiar with our wines, we're most well known for our Yarden wines. But we also have Gamla and Hermon wines. Of course, we export all over the world. We have big markets in Europe, in Asia, Japan. I've been to Japan 10 times because that's a major market of ours. And I just took prices off Vivino just to give you kind of an idea of the range of prices that we're working with. Price per bottle. Probably our most iconic wine is Yarden Cabernet Sauvignon, which runs in the mid-$30 range. So if we look at Israel at a glance, and I have to give a little bit of background here, this is an old map here from Rogov's Guide to Israeli Wines. But as Sagi said, we're a tiny country, but the interesting thing about Israel is that we have the diversity in climate and geography of a large country. And I think a lot of first-time visitors to Israel actually find that shocking to see that those big differences in very short areas. So to put in perspective, we're about 3% the size of France. Here, a world map, we're in the Eastern Mediterranean here. And our placement is very important because if you think about the intersection between Europe, Asia, and Africa, it would be pretty much where we're located. So we're a tiny country, but we have these big forces pulling us in different directions. We sit on the Syrian-African Rift. And because of our placement here, we're one of the largest flyways of migrating birds in the world. 500 million birds fly over Israel twice a year. Yeah, it's a great place to bird watch, storks and cranes here in the picture. As we get closer in, just to think about that diversity, why isn't this? We have some of the most southern Mediterranean climate in the Northern Hemisphere, and we have the most northern tropical coral reefs in the Gulf of Eilat. So again, kind of this weird position on the planet. We're zooming in here a little bit more. Precipitation range from 23 millimeters in Eilat to 1,600 millimeters on the top of Mount Hermon. So we're getting closer here, Israel. We're seeing the Golan Heights here. These little colored dots you see are our vineyards coming into view. So in terms of elevation, minus 400 meters below sea level at the Dead Sea, up to 2,200 meters in the highest peak of the Israeli Mount Hermon. And here's the Sea of Galilee, the Golan Heights here, which kind of looks like an ear. And this is our vineyard sites, going from about 400 meters in elevation in the south up to close to 1,200 meters in elevation in the north. And the winery is located in Catherine, and this is a half an hour drive, and this is a half an hour drive. So smack in the middle of our wine region. As you said, Wolfgang, we manage directly 230 hectares of vineyards, and we have long-term contracts with an additional 370. So we're not a small producer. We work with 600 hectares of vineyards, which are divided up into more than 400 vineyard blocks, which we monitor individually. So the Golan Heights is volcanic, and we all know there's wines being made from volcanic areas around the world. Mediterranean climate, obviously, there's a high correlation between Mediterranean climate and wine production. In terms of the origins of wines, we think it's here, which is only about 1,000 kilometers from where we are. So we think wine quickly came to the Eastern Mediterranean, then spread west. In terms of the Golan Heights, I think, Sagi, maybe this was the map you showed. There's been about 60 ancient wine presses found in the Golan Heights, so we're far from being the first people to produce wine, obviously, in the Golan Heights. This is our average rainfall by month. The gray is the average, and the blue is what we had in millimeters per month leading up to last vintage. So a meteorologist would look at this graph and say, okay, classic Mediterranean climate, cold, wet winters, warm, dry summers. So in our 14 weather stations that we have, our average, long-term average is 614 millimeters. But the higher elevation vineyards have more and the lower elevations have a bit less. This is vapor pressure deficit, which is combining temperature and humidity. These numbers mean the higher you go, the more stressful the environment. So the hotter and drier it is. And 3.5 is used around the world as kind of a number that is below that is not very stressful to the vine. Above that, it starts being stressful. But anybody that works with this kind of data would look at this graph. This is a 5-year average and see that we're talking about a pretty moderate place to grow wine. It's not a very hot and dry area, the Golan Heights. And if we looked at minimum VPD, we get, even during the summer, we have cool, wet nights. So we reach 0 pretty much every night. So 33rd parallel in the Golan Heights, but as we go up in elevation, it obviously gets colder. And according to the law of bioclimatics, the elevation would translate into a climate of more between the 37th and 45th parallel. So in terms of what that means for harvest, between our different elevations and varieties, we have quite a long harvest. We normally harvest 30% of our fruit in August, 40% in September, 30% in October. So 14-week harvest would be pretty typical, but 12 to 17 weeks, depending on the vintage. I mentioned that we have basalt soils, but volcanic soils, but we did a big survey of soils in the Golan Heights 13 years ago now, and we have identified 5 distinct types of volcanic soils. One is tuff-based, 2 are basalt-based, but they're different, and 2 are different kinds of mixes of tuff and basalt. And so that was a map, sorry about that. That's a map of the northern Golan Heights. Here you can see the cinder cones. And so we know for each vineyard block exactly what soil type. And of course, we have a lot of climate data due to our climate stations. So our philosophy is pretty simple. We're at the 33rd parallel, high elevation vineyards, volcanic soils. So we're striving to grow independent, balanced, sustainable vineyards that produce fruit with a lot of personality. What that personality is, obviously, is an expression of the place. And then try to find a way to make wines, authentic wines that reflect the character of those vineyards and of our terroir. I said sustainable, and sustainability is a very important issue for us. Here's a picture of barrel cellars and bottling and case goods completely covered with solar cells. We've, in the past years, lowered our carbon footprint quite dramatically. 2020, 2/3 of our electricity from solar, and now wind turbines are being erected in the Golan Heights. So hopefully from next year, we'll be completely solar or wind powered electricity. Obviously, an important part of sustainability are the vines that you plant, and we have our own propagation block. We have 2 vineyards inside insect-proof netting where we grow the wood to make grafts for planting. And this is our nursery. So ever since 2011, any vine that we plant has been produced by ourselves, and we also sell vines to other producers. We also, in 2017, became the first vineyards to become certified sustainable. So all the vineyards that we directly manage are certified for sustainable wine growing, and any of our wines that have 85% of fruit coming from certified sustainable vineyards will have this logo on the back label. So that is a very quick overview. I hope I kept it close to 8 minutes. Thank you for your time and attention. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Victor. Very interesting, fascinating. Victor, I've got one question. How high are your vineyards? How high are they?
So from 400 meters in the southern Golan and that's 600 meters above the Sea of Galilee, because the Sea of Galilee is at minus 200 meters. So you change dramatically in a 20-minute drive from quite tropical conditions to quite moderate conditions going up in that elevation. And then our highest elevation vineyards are a bit over 1,100 meters.
Wow. And I think that is changing the character. Yes, I think the plant, the grape, is changing depending on which level it's growing, correct?
Yeah, we really think of the Golan Heights as pretty much 3 distinct areas. So the southern Golan, which is older soils, warmer, the mid Golan, which are younger soils, cooler, and then the quite cooler northern Golan.
I can't wait one day to go to Israel and have a close look at this vineyard. Thank you very much, Victor.